Hey everybody, it's Friday and it's Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich. We're getting ready for a great weekend. Good news with the cold front. It's continuing to pick up speed, which is great news for later this evening. And we've got to talk about what is now Hurricane Elsa, though I would not get too worried about that just yet. Let's focus on the cold front first because it's making good progress. This is a look at the front. The front has made it to the foothills already. So I'm a little more optimistic that we're going to see some much better weather by the evening hours. As this cold front moves through to the south and east, it does look like we're going to see some much drier air and kind of get in here maybe a little bit sooner. So until the front clears, you still got the risk for some pop-up storms, and I certainly could see a few storms develop along this front as it continues to push to the south and east. But the fact that it's making such good progress to the south and east means evening outdoor plans are looking much, much better. But let's take a quick look at Elsa before we look at the Futurecast, because Elsa is way down here. You could see Hurricane Elsa down here. Now a hurricane. It's actually got really high pressure for a hurricane. Now the pressure is around 995 millibars. So it's still moving so quickly that I think it's being decoupled. The low level circulation is kind of tilting away from the upper level. They like to be on top of each other to get strong. But you could see the forecast track is now taking it generally off towards the north and west. I'll put the cone on here first, and then moves it up into Florida by the time we get into early next week. And so right now, we're looking at maybe the potential that this could be a tropical storm somewhere, maybe near the Georgia-South Carolina border, maybe as soon as Tuesday morning, but more likely probably Wednesday morning, depending on the speed. So thinking more in that Wednesday time frame. We'll talk a little bit more about Elsa here in a minute because we've got a week, basically, not a week, maybe about 6-7 days to watch that. Let's talk about this cold front first. So this is the Futurecast. We'll look at the cold front. You could see it pushing through pretty much right now as I'm doing this around 11 a.m. We'll go into the afternoon hours, and the front continues to push off to the south and east. And you can see that right along the front as it moves through, there might be a little opportunity for a pop-up storm. So I'm not going to totally write it off, but the chances are going to decrease pretty quickly as we go through the evening. Notice the time up in the corner there around 8-9 o'clock. And you see that little second surge. So that's why I don't want to totally discount the fact that we could see a storm or two bubble up as the front pushes through. But by tomorrow morning, the front is long gone. And you can see we are all the way in the clear for the rest of the weekend. I mean, that is some gorgeous weather. 4th of July weekend looks absolutely beautiful. So let's talk about Elsa. Elsa, where is Elsa going to go? Well, Elsa's even off the map here. It's not even in our forecast track here. But we can take a look at the intensity forecast for Elsa. Kind of staying pretty flat. This was the morning runs right around a Cat 1. A couple kind of spike it early and then decrease it back down into a Cat 1 and maybe even tropical storm. What's going on in the guidance here is kind of interesting. Pretty straightforward up until you get to the Big Island. So the next 48 hours, pretty good agreement in the guidance, but there's a pretty big split here from Gulf of Mexico to the Bahamas, with the center being pretty much where the forecast is. So this is a pretty wide swath of options here. And the other thing not really taken into account here is this interacts with Cuba, Hispaniola, and these big islands down here. You're talking about it disrupting the flow. That's why you're seeing a weaker system once it gets up in here. But obviously there are some avenues where it doesn't hit as much land and it stays stronger. So those are things that are still uncertain. There is just a lot of uncertainty with this forecast. But one of the things I like to look at here, and then I'm going to show you this real quickly, is what we look at as ensembles or probabilities of where it's going. So this is the probability of a tropical storm with 34 knots, which is 40 mile per hour winds, passing within this point on the map. So you can see down here, here's Elsa within the next 72 hours. We go to 48 to 96. This is the European ensembles kind of taking it basically right here. This is an old cold front, so it's trying to intensify that a little bit. We go further into the future, and you can see the ensembles, even in the European, takes it pretty far to the west and into areas of the Gulf of Mexico. We go even further into the future, and the probabilities of a tropical storm being around fall down pretty low. So this guidance takes it further west and kind of weakens it and falls apart. Now, we could look at another piece of guidance, which is a little bit different here. This is the GFS, or what we call the American model. And I'm showing a little different thing here, showing what we call spaghettios. The spaghettio shows the position of where it thinks the system will be. And you could look down here in the bottom of the screen. You see all those little spaghettios? that's where the GFS thinks, the ensembles think it's going to be. We go into the future and notice even the GFS primarily takes them into the Gulf of Mexico. So it's interesting that the ensemble forecasts are taking this primarily into the Gulf of Mexico, and then up into areas of the Northeast Gulf, while what we call the deterministic models, which are those spaghetti plots, a lot of them are trying to steer it off to the east. So there's certainly a ton of uncertainty in this. So it's kind of weird. There's certainty in the uncertainty, if you will. So let's take a look at the forecast of this again. I'm going to turn all these layers off. We'll put the tropical guidance back on here. I'm going to put everything on here just so you got the wind radii and everything else. So here's a look at the forecast. You could see it getting to Florida. There seems to be a big defining moment here over the weekend, right in there. Does it do this or does it do this? And usually what you're going to see is something down the middle. And in any scenario where it passes over Cuba for this length of time and then passes over Florida, that means for the Carolinas, whatever's left over is going to be a weaker system. Doesn't mean it can't produce some storm surge, some heavy rain, and a little bit of wind. But it's certainly, if it's got to pass over the entire island of Cuba and then most of the peninsula of Florida, by the time it gets up here into the Carolinas by Wednesday, it's probably just going to be a rainmaker. Now, not that that's, a good thing, because rain, we know, flash flooding is a big issue. But I'm not overly concerned with this track based on the fact that it's got to pass over so many islands and it got some obstacles. The other fact is, it's just so far out there, folks. I like telling you what we know and what we don't know. There's more unknowns in the long range than the short term. Like I said before, here, I know exactly what's happening here. There's a big uncertainty. In fact, the airs, even in the forecast cone, are between 200 and 300 miles at that time range. So again, don't go wildly crazy and cancel plans at the beach and change everything, because we could be 3 days from now and have no issues at all. And even if we do have a storm heading our way, it could be incredibly weak, which produces 1 day of rain and squally weather and then is gone. Certainly not something that I would make drastic changes to my plans or do anything rash, at least at this point. And the other good news is we have a beautiful weekend on tap and we've got plenty of time to watch it. Have a great weekend. I will post updates throughout the next couple of days. Don't worry.